At 3:40 local time, the northern approaches to the Strait of Hormuz are doing what they do in the hours before dawn, providing as little information as possible through as many channels as simultaneously as the physics of the environment supports. The sea surface is flat. There is no moon. The stars are present but not generous. The water temperature at the surface is 27 degrees Celsius and drops to approximately 19 degrees at 60 meters, which is where the thermocline lives in October in this part of the Gulf of Oman. And the thermocline is one of the most operationally significant geological features in the Fifth Fleet's area of responsibility, because a thermocline is where sound goes to change its behavior, and a submarine operating below a thermocline exists from the perspective of a surface ship's hull-mounted sonar in a different acoustic universe than the ship searching for it. USS Mahan, hull number DDG-72, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, is making 9 knots on an anti-submarine warfare barrier track across the southern approaches to the strait. The ship has been on this track for 4 hours and 11 minutes, which is long enough that the watch section has internalized the track's turning points, and the sonar operators have built a detailed acoustic picture of everything in the water beneath them that is not a submarine. 2 commercial tankers transiting north, a pod of false killer whales that appeared at 1:17 and provided 22 minutes of acoustic entertainment before the sonar operators classified them and moved on. The bottom returns from the shelf edge. The distant merchant traffic noise that is always present in the northern Gulf of Oman because the world's oil moves through here, and oil tankers are not quiet. All of this is background. The foreground is empty. This is not reassuring. In the Combat Information Center, the anti-submarine warfare coordinator has been watching an empty foreground for 4 hours and 11 minutes, and he knows something that the empty foreground does not tell him, but that his training and the intelligence digest do. The foreground is not empty because there is nothing in it. The foreground is empty because something in it is very good at being in it without being observed. The P-8A Poseidon, that has been working the area since 21:30 the previous evening, had established the datum, a brief, definitive, maddeningly short, mad contact at 21:47, 11 seconds of magnetic anomaly indication, consistent with a large metallic object at approximately 45 meters depth, moving slowly, bearing northwest. 11 seconds, then nothing. The P-8A crew had prosecuted the datum with sonobuoys for 2 hours. They had produced 2 possible narrowband contacts that the acoustic analysts had assessed as probable at the time and had subsequently downgraded to possible as the buoy field aged and the signal quality degraded. They had not produced a confirmed contact. At 23:30, the P-8A had reached bingo fuel and returned to Bahrain. Its relief had launched at 23:15 and was now on station, working the buoy field with fresh eyes and full fuel and the knowledge that something was out there. Because 11 seconds of mad indication does not lie. The something in question was Iran's Tariq submarine. This is the part of the brief where the tone changes, because the Tariq is a Kilo-class submarine, the Russian-built Type 877 EKM. And the Kilo-class is not an instrument of comedy in the way that a 1961 helicopter or a GPS-guided lottery ticket is an instrument of comedy. The Kilo-class submarine is what the Russian submarine industry produced when it decided to build the quietest conventional submarine in the world. And it succeeded to the degree that NATO analysts gave it the nickname black hole, which is not a compliment you bestow on something you find easy to track. On battery power in a thermocline, At slow speed, a Kilo-class submarine produces acoustic emissions that are, in the specific technical language of people who measure these things for a living, very difficult. Not impossible, difficult. The distinction matters enormously in anti-submarine warfare because impossible means you can stop looking and difficult means you have to look harder. Iran acquired its 3 Kilo-class submarines from Russia in the 1990s, which is recent enough that the maintenance history, while complicated by sanctions, has not had 50 years in which to develop the specific character that 50 years of sanctions-constrained maintenance produces. The Kilos are Iran's most capable naval assets. This channel notes that without irony and without the equipment roast that other Iranian platforms invite, because the Kilo is not a museum piece, it is a professionally maintained, operationally deployed submarine with a crew that has been working in the Strait of Hormuz for years, that knows these waters with the intimacy of repeated operational exposure, and that has been exploiting the Strait's acoustic environment with the specific patience of people who understand that patience is a tactical asset in the waters they are operating in. The Tariq had been submerged since 1900 the previous evening. 8 hours and 40 minutes of battery operation. The Type 8 77 EKM's lead-acid battery system provides approximately 72 hours of submerged endurance at creep speed, 3 knots, and somewhat less at the 4-knot speed the Tariq had been maintaining since the P-8A established its initial datum, and the tactical picture aboard the submarine had presumably indicated that moving was preferable to remaining stationary. The battery state at 340 was not yet critical. It was approaching the range where a commanding officer, with 11 seconds of P-8A mad contact to his north and an uncertain acoustic picture, begins thinking about his options and his timeline. At 340, the P-8A Poseidon on station, 2 hours into its sortie, with 6 hours of fuel remaining, acquired a contact on its acoustic processor. The contact was not on a sonobuoy. It was on the aircraft's own ESM suite, a brief, narrow, high-frequency emission bearing approximately 275 from the aircraft's current position. The frequency was consistent with a snorkel mast radar, the specific emission produced when a submarine raises its snorkel mast and uses the mast-mounted search radar to check for surface contacts before committing to a snorkel evolution. The emission lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds of active radar sweep. Then silence. The acoustic coordinator in the P-8A's aft section was watching the ESM display. He had been watching it for 2 hours. He saw the 4-second sweep. He called it to the flight crew in the time it takes a person to process something they have been waiting to see and then say it. ESM contact, bearing 275, snorkel mast radar, 4 seconds active, consistent with Kilo-class mast antenna. The mission commander banked the aircraft left toward the bearing. The sonobuoy deployment pattern changed immediately, not toward the ESM contact's position, but ahead of it, based on the last known heading from the MAD datum and the 6-hour elapsed time. The acoustic picture did not need the submarine to be at the ESM contact's precise position. It needed to be ahead of where the submarine was going, because a submarine that has raised its snorkel mast radar has committed to a snorkel evolution, and a submarine in a snorkel evolution is not maneuvering aggressively, and a submarine that is not maneuvering aggressively is following a predictable path, and predictable paths are where sonobuoys go. Here is the vulnerability that the Tariq's commanding officer had not been able to avoid, and that the tactical picture aboard USS Mahan was about to become relevant to. The snorkel evolution had been timed for 340 because 340 in the northern approaches to the Strait of Hormuz is the darkest hour. the hour of minimum commercial radar activity, the hour when the combined sleep debt of the surface ships in the area produces watch sections that are fully alert but narrowly attentive. The Tariq's commanding officer had chosen well, in the sense that 3:40 was the best available time. The problem was not the choice of time. The problem was that a battery at 8 hours and 40 minutes of 4-knot operation is a battery that does not have the luxury of choosing not to snorkel. And choosing the best bad option is different from choosing a good option. And the P-8A had been waiting for exactly this moment, with exactly the sensor that catches exactly this event. 4 seconds of snorkel mast radar. The ESM had it. The P-8A had a datum. The sonobuoys were going into the water. At 3:44, the P-8A dropped 4 sonobuoys in a pattern ahead of the projected snorkel position. The buoys entered the water at intervals of approximately 45 seconds. The first 3 produced background noise. The fourth, at 3:47, produced a contact. The acoustic processor showed it immediately, a broadband signature at 38 meters, consistent with the snorkel evolution itself, the diesel engine that the snorkel feeds, running at low power, recharging the battery, producing acoustic output that the buoy at 200 meters range was picking up with the clarity available when a diesel engine is running and you have a microphone nearby. The diesel signature is not subtle. The Kilo-class on battery is a black hole. The Kilo-class, with its diesel running during a snorkel evolution, is a diesel engine with an excellent submarine attached to it, and diesel engines are acoustically cooperative in ways that submarine batteries are not. Diesel contact, buoy 4, the acoustic operator reported. Broadband signature, consistent with snorkel evolution. Bearing 310 from buoy 4, range approximately 300 meters. Depth 36 meters, 300 meters from the buoy. The buoy was 200 meters from the projected position. The submarine was within 500 meters of the datum the acoustic operator had been building for 6 hours. The snorkel evolution had placed it. At 0348, USS Mahan's SQS-53C hull-mounted sonar acquired the diesel signature. Range 4,200 meters. Bearing 268. The diesel was audible to the surface ship's sonar at 4,200 meters, which is not a range that would normally comfort a submarine crew. The sonar supervisor logged it with the specific emphasis of someone who has been listening to silence for 4 hours and has been handed something that is not silence. Diesel contact bearing 268, range 4,200 meters. Classification, snorkel evolution, confidence, high. High confidence. The ASW coordinator updated the contact status. He reached for his radio. Now, the problem that existed at 3:48 that had not existed at 3:47. USS Mahan was 9 nautical miles northwest of the ESM contact's position, making 9 knots on its barrier track. The snorkel contact was bearing 268, range 4,200 meters. A submarine in a snorkel evolution, at 36 meters with a diesel running, is not in a maneuvering posture. It is in a maintenance posture. The crew is recharging the battery, refreshing the air, doing the things that must be done periodically, regardless of what is happening outside. The Tariq was in a snorkel evolution. This was tactically exploitable. It was also, from USS Mahan's perspective, in a geographic position that the Strait's geography was making complicated. The P-8A's contact datum was 4,200 meters from USS Mahan on a bearing that placed the submarine between the ship's current position and the shallow water shelf edge to the south. The barrier track that USS Mahan had been running for 4 hours and 11 minutes was designed to place the ship between potential submarine routes and the open ocean to the east. The submarine had come from the west, from the Strait's approaches, and was now south-southeast of the ship's current position, on the shelf side, which was the side of the barrier that the ship's track had not been optimized to cover. The track was designed for a submarine approaching from the Gulf. The submarine had come from within the Gulf and was heading east. The geometry was not wrong. It was simply not the geometry the track had been designed for, and the 4,200-meter range with the submarine in a snorkel evolution and a shelf edge to the south gave the commanding officer approximately 3 nautical miles of maneuvering room before the geometry became something other than manageable. The commanding officer had been notified at 0348 and was in CIC at 0350. He looked at the contact datum, the depth contours, the submarine's assessed course and speed, 4 knots, course approximately 090, consistent with a submarine threading east through the strait approaches under the thermocline. He looked at his own ship's position on the barrier track, 9 nautical miles northwest of the contact. He looked at the P-8A's sonobuoy picture, which was building a solution with the improving confidence of a prosecution that had a clear acoustic source. "Classification confidence," he said. "High on diesel, sir. The snorkel is running. P-8A has the submarine on 4 buoys. Position solution is building. How long does a snorkel evolution take? Type 8, 77 EKM, typical snorkel time for a full recharge from this battery state, 45 minutes to 2 hours, dependent on how deep the discharge went." The ASW coordinator paused. "They've been under for 8 hours and 40 minutes at 4 knots. They're not doing a quick top-off. 45 minutes minimum." The commanding officer had at minimum 45 minutes of a contact that was not maneuvering aggressively, with a diesel engine running at a confirmed position in a snorkel evolution. He also had 4 nautical miles between him and the contact. He made his decision in approximately 2 seconds, which is how decisions are made at 350 in the Strait of Hormuz approaches when the tactical picture has just changed dramatically. Optimize ASW prosecution position. Coordinate with P-8A. Do not close inside 2 nautical miles without my authorization. Aye, sir. This is the specific professionalism of ASW operations against a real target in contested waters. The decision to maintain the prosecution without closing to a range that would alert the contact and cause it to abort the snorkel evolution, abandon the battery charge, dive deep, and become the acoustic black hole again for the next several hours. The goal of the prosecution was not to force the submarine to abort. The goal of the prosecution was to maintain contact through the snorkel evolution, build the best possible acoustic characterization of the Tariq in its current operational configuration, and to do all of this while the submarine crew was focused on the mechanics of recharging their battery rather than on evading the forces that had found them. The SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite had been recording since the P-8A's first ESM contact at 0340. The snorkel mast radar emission, 4 seconds, consistent with the Kilo-class mast antenna frequency, was in the collection log. The diesel engine acoustic signature, now running continuously, was being recorded by the SQS-53C and cross-correlated with the P-8A's 4-buoy picture. The diesel signature of a Type 8 77 EKM at low power during a snorkel evolution is a specific acoustic fingerprint. The specific combustion characteristics of the Kilo's diesel plant, running at the specific RPM of a battery recharge rather than propulsion, producing a signature profile that the acoustic library had baseline entries for from Soviet-era collection events and had been attempting to update from operational contacts in the Gulf for several years. The contact duration was building. The acoustic library was updating in real time. At 4:12, 24 minutes into the snorkel evolution, The P-8A dropped 2 additional buoys to refine the position solution. Both buoys acquired the contact. The position solution had reached the quality that the acoustic community describes as high precision. The submarine's position was known within approximately 50 meters, its depth within 2 meters, its course within 5 degrees, and its speed within half a knot. The submarine was in the P-8A's solution. The P-8A's crew had found, classified, and precisely located an Iranian Kilo-class submarine in the Strait of Hormuz approaches in the darkest hour of an October night using an 11-second mad contact from 6 hours earlier as their starting point. "How's the acoustic product?" the mission commander asked the acoustic coordinator. "Sir, we're getting the diesel plant signature at good signal quality on 5 buoys. I have the combustion cycle frequency and the exhaust timing. The acoustic library has baseline kilo diesel data from a 1994 collection event." A pause. "The engine they're running tonight doesn't match the 1994 baseline. Different combustion characteristics. I think they've had the plant serviced. The timing signature is cleaner than the baseline." "How much cleaner?" "Enough to suggest a recent overhaul. Maybe in the last 2 years. The previous collection events in 2019 and 2021 showed degraded signatures. This one is closer to original spec. This is the specific intelligence value of catching an Iranian Kilo-class submarine in a snorkel evolution in the Strait of Hormuz at 4:12 in the morning. The diesel plant signature, cleaned up, overhauled, running closer to its original specification, told the collection community something about the Iranian Navy's maintenance program that no satellite imagery or signals intelligence had confirmed. Someone had overhauled this submarine's propulsion plant recently. The sanctions environment that was supposed to constrain Iran's access to submarine parts had apparently not constrained it sufficiently to prevent this work, and knowing that it had not constrained it was operationally significant in ways that the Tariq's commanding officer, running his diesel at 4 nautical miles from a destroyer and 5 sonobuoys, was not aware of contributing to. At 4:23, the diesel note changed. The acoustic operators on the P-8A and on USS Mahan's sonar console heard it simultaneously. The engine was spinning down. Not a malfunction. The specific spin-down profile of a diesel engine completing a recharge cycle, reducing RPM, transitioning the boat back to battery power. The snorkel evolution was ending. At 4:25, the ESM suite on the P-8A produced a second radar sweep. 2 seconds this time, not 4. The snorkel mast check before retraction, shorter than the initial sweep, because the commanding officer knew from the first sweep that there were no immediate surface threats within radar range. And the check before descent is confirmation rather than initial reconnaissance. 2 seconds, then silence. The diesel signature disappeared from the sonar picture at 4:26. The contact had descended below the thermocline. The acoustic library entry for the Tariq's current diesel plant configuration was now 43 minutes of high-quality recording at multiple signal angles from 5 sonobuoys and a hull-mounted sonar, including the combustion cycle frequency, the exhaust timing, and the spin-down profile. The plant overhaul that the 1994 baseline comparison had revealed was documented across 43 minutes of acoustic evidence, and the position at descent was known to 50 meters. "Contact has descended," the sonar supervisor reported. "Last position bearing 265, range 4,400 meters. Depth assessment, below thermocline." He paused. "Contact is below thermocline. SQS-53C is losing the contact." Below the thermocline, the Kilo was returning to its natural state, the black hole reconstituted. The hull-mounted sonar, designed for conditions that the thermocline was now imposing between it and the contact was working against the acoustic boundary that the thermocline provides between upper and lower water masses. The contact was fading. Not lost, the P-8A's buoys had a brief window of fading signal before the thermocline's effect fully asserted itself, but fading. The commanding officer looked at the contact's last position, 4,400 meters, 46 minutes of snorkel evolution, a freshly recharged battery, a Kilo-class submarine that was about to become, again, a black hole in the water below the thermocline at whatever depth the commanding officer down there had decided was appropriate after 46 minutes of knowing he had been found. P-8A Mahan. Contact has descended. Do you have continuation?
Mahan. Negative on the hull mounted. Buoys are fading. We're transitioning to passive track. Contact is below the layer. Stand by.
Stand by. The Tariq was below the thermocline with a fully recharged battery and a precise knowledge of its own position and the knowledge that it had been found during the snorkel evolution, because any submarine commanding officer who has just completed a snorkel evolution in the Strait of Hormuz approaches and then descended below the thermocline has every reason to assume that the acoustic environment above the thermocline produced information that someone was recording. The tactical question, what the Tariq did next, was now the Tariq's to answer. The intelligence question, what the 43 minutes of recording had produced, was already answered, and the answer was going to Bahrain before the buoys finished fading. On the P-8A, the acoustic coordinator was completing his collection log. The log contained the ESM records from both radar sweeps. It contained the 43-minute diesel acoustic profile, time-stamped and cross-correlated between 5 buoys and the SQS-53C. It contained the position solution at descent and the descent profile. It contained the combustion cycle frequency comparison against the 1994 baseline and the 2019 and 2021 operational contacts. And it contained a notation that the acoustic coordinator had added at 4:15 during the snorkel evolution, when the quality of the diesel signature had stabilized and he had had 45 seconds to think about what it meant. Propulsion plant appears recently overhauled. Combustion cycle and exhaust timing significantly cleaner than 2021 contact baseline. Recommend technical intelligence follow-up on Iranian submarine maintenance supply chain. That notation would appear in the intelligence report that was transmitted to 5th Fleet at 5:30. It would be read by analysts who would compare it against the supply chain intelligence that had been tracking Iranian submarine maintenance materials. It would generate a query to the relevant collection authorities. The query would eventually, not immediately, but eventually, through the accumulation of collection that is how intelligence works, produce an answer about where the Tariq had been serviced, and when and by whom and with what materials and through what logistics chain. The 43-minute acoustic recording from a snorkel evolution in the dark over the Strait of Hormuz approaches was the starting point of that chain. At 5:15, the P-8A's buoy field was fully faded. The Tariq was below the thermocline, untracked, somewhere in the northern Gulf of Oman with a fresh battery, and the knowledge that it had been found once and would need to not be found again. The prosecution had produced no weapons employment, no threat to USS Mahan, and no deviation from any vessel's authorized operating area. It had produced 43 minutes of acoustic characterization, a propulsion plant overhaul indicator, a descent position accurate to 50 meters, 2 ESM records of the snorkel mast radar, and a recommendation to the supply chain intelligence community. The watch section log aboard USS Mahan for the period read 0340 to 0515, P-8A ESM contact, Snorkel mast radar, bearing 275. SQS-53C acquired diesel contact 0348, bearing 268, range 4,200 meters. P-8A Prosecution with 5 sonobuoys. Contact and snorkel evolution, 348 to 426, 43 minutes. Descent confirmed 426. Contact below thermocline. Prosecution continues passive. No weapons employment. No hostile action. The intelligence annex was 6 pages. The 6th page was the supply chain recommendation. By morning, Iranian state media had not reported anything about submarine operations in the Gulf of Oman, because Iranian state media does not report about submarine operations in the Gulf of Oman, because submarine operations are sensitive, and state media is not where sensitive operations are discussed. The IRGCN's operational security on submarine movements is, by regional standards, reasonable. What it cannot control is the acoustic signature of a diesel engine during a snorkel evolution, which is a physical characteristic of the machinery and not a communications choice, and which the P-8A's acoustic processor had been waiting to hear since 2147, the previous evening, when 11 seconds of mad indication had told it something worth waiting for was in the water. The Kilo is a black hole. The snorkel is a 43-minute window into it. The P-8A knew how long to wait. Bye for now.